do this again. Let's try this again. Little technical difficulties there on that last one, but we'll pick it up right off from the top. I'm back. I'm back. I'll pick it right up back from the top. How's the video? Can y'all hear me? Can y'all see me good? Somebody? Anybody? All right, this is going to be a continuation of the other one, all right? So I'm going to pick it up where I was at. So I was just saying, who remembers in high school or middle school, especially when one becomes, you know, self-conscious, right, about our looks and about our appearance, right? Because I don't remember really in elementary being worried about a little zit or a little pimple. But who remembers not wanting to go to high school or middle school and trying to come up with any excuse you could tell your parents why you didn't want to go to school because you didn't want your pimple or your zit to be seen? Who remembers that? So yeah, I got a little pimple right here on my nose. So I got that out of the way. When it comes to mainstream news media and law enforcement, they share a very cozy relationship. Mainstream media depends on police, law enforcement agencies, right? To feed them little scraps of info and little tips, to invite them to their so-called press conferences, to keep them in the general loop, right? Mainstream news media values that cozy relationship that they share with law enforcement. So they're very careful. Remember this, because we'll come back to this in a sec. They're very careful not to bite the hand that feeds them. All right, remember that one. Let's put a pin in that. Now, the flip side of that is law enforcement needs mainstream media. They need mainstream media to spin their stories, to do damage control for them, to minimize cases of assault and police brutality and misconduct and corruption, which many times mainstream news media does by literally looking the other way. Case in point. A Rochester, New York police officer just this past weekend in Niagara Falls, New York, after a long night of gambling, a night which casino employees and management in Niagara Falls, New York, described as several issues that they had with this Rochester, New York police officer on the casino floor, on the game room floor. What's good? Padilla. Got West Coast. We tried this a little while ago, my man, and we had technical difficulties, so we're running it back. So again, an off-duty, let me clear that part up. He was off-duty. An off-duty Rochester, New York police officer just this past weekend in Niagara Falls, New York, at a casino in Niagara Falls, New York, about an hour and a half from Rochester, New York, held Niagara Falls, New York, and Buffalo, New York area police and SWAT. Let me say that again. And SWAT teams at bay while he holed himself up in his hotel room with a woman. Okay? Reports out of WIVB in Buffalo, New York. Because again, Rochester, New York mainstream news media, I just got done talking about it, selectively chooses which stories of police involved activity and incidents they report on. I believe just one Rochester, New York, which I'm not going to mention the name, not going to give him 15 seconds of fame on my channel. I believe just one Rochester, New York mainstream news media outlet briefly grazed over the story and reported this disturbing incident. But other than that, that's it. The Rochester, New York Police Department wants this to go away so badly. And that is the influence that they have with mainstream news media. And if mainstream news media, and this goes for wherever, this goes in your city, in your town, in your state, if mainstream news media doesn't accommodate and doesn't throw a bone to law enforcement every once in a while, especially with a story like this one, and I'll finish telling you what happened. If news media, if mainstream news media doesn't oblige law enforcement and throw them a bone, give them a break every once in a while, they will be blackballed and blacklisted from press conferences, from receiving the scraps that they receive from law enforcement in the form of tips, info, gossip. It is a cozy relationship, folks, that mainstream news media and law enforcement enjoy together. It's a give and take on both sides. Scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. And that is why you basically, people from Rochester, New York are probably hearing this for the first time. Again, except I believe just one Rochester, New York mainstream news media outlet that quickly mentioned the story, and that's it. No follow-up, nothing. Let me get back to the story. So again, to recap, a Rochester, New York police officer held Niagara Falls, New York, and Buffalo, New York area police and SWAT teams at bay over the weekend at a casino, at a hotel casino in Niagara Falls, New York, while he was gambling all night. And according to casino management, there was several disturbing behavior and issues with this Rochester, New York police officer, this off-duty police officer, throughout the night on the game floor in the casino. Okay? There was an issue with him all night. So, he holds himself up in a hotel room, okay, with a woman, and hostage negotiation type of scenario here. The woman is eventually let go. He is arrested, okay? Not sure if he was charged. News reports said he was arrested. And pretty much that's all. Back to Rochester, New York mainstream news media. You have a Rochester, New York cop. Okay? Some site says he was an employee. WIVB updated the story and said he is in fact an off-duty Rochester, New York police officer, who, by the way, this is very interesting, who, by the way, is on injury, is off work because of an injury. So he's not working. But yet he's at a casino gambling the night away and holding Niagara Falls, New York, Buffalo, New York police at bay in a hotel room, shacked up with some woman. And yet, I mean, I would think that's a story, right? That's a story. You have a public servant, you know, in another city, in another county, an hour and a half away from Rochester. Not only was a problem all night, according to casino management, but then he holds himself up in his hotel room, and reports are that he was suicidal. Now, let me hit on something real quick here right off the bat and clear it up so there's no misunderstanding. In no way, shape, or form am I trying to make this about bashing this officer. Mental illness, depression, suicide, they're all very real, and even something that's very personal to me. As many of you know, my father committed suicide after years of harassment and intimidation by the Rochester, New York Police Department. So I want to make that clear. Okay? This is not about that. But at the end of the day, we have a public servant, an off-duty Rochester, New York police officer on injury leave at a casino, being an issue to casino management, according to casino management, all night, and then hold himself up in a hotel room at the casino with a woman. SWAT and police responded, and there was a standoff situation. And yet, and he's arrested. And yet, mainstream news media outlets here in Rochester, New York, ignore the story. No follow-up from the one that did graze over the story briefly. Rochester, New York Mayor Lovely Warren has been completely silent on it. Newly sworn in Rochester, New York Police Chief, who took the helm a few weeks ago, Mark Simmons, hasn't said anything, hasn't addressed this. Again, to be clear, it is not about bashing anyone, and let alone especially mental illness, which is something that's very real to me, very personal to me, with what happened with my dad many years ago. But you have a public servant who took a sworn oath to uphold the Constitution, to protect citizens, to protect this community. And he's off in some casino while he's on injury leave from the RPD, from the Rochester, New York Police Department. And he holds himself up after a night of disturbing behavior and being an issue on the floor, according to casino management. He holds himself up in a room with a woman before letting her go, and he is arrested. And you don't hear nothing, not a peep from Rochester, New York media. No follow-up, no stories. The mayor is silent. The chief is silent. Remember what I told you. Law enforcement and mainstream news media share a very cozy relationships. Same thing in your villages, in your towns, in your cities, in your states, wherever you live. The same thing happens. It is a codependent relationship. They work together. They look out for each other. I think it should be disturbing that an individual, okay, who is going through some mental health issues, obviously, who is unstable, mentally unstable, it should be concerning to citizens, especially here in Rochester, New York. The mayor should be out in front of this. The chief should be out in front of this, and they should explain what happened. We're talking about an individual with the authority and the power that has been bestowed upon him to detain you, to limit your freedom of movement, to arrest you. An individual who is in this community with a firearm every day that he works. And even if it's not at work, cops have firearms at home. Should this individual not only be on the job, be on the force, patrolling neighborhoods, interacting with citizens, but not just that, should he even possess a firearm? All questions that should have been answered and addressed immediately by Rochester, New York Mayor Lovely Warren and Rochester, New York Police Chief Mark Simmons. Not a word, not a peep. Stay tuned.